I never thought that eavesdropping on hospital janitors would lead me to save my husband's life. But sometimes the most impossible love stories begin with the most ordinary conversations. Jake was dying, and I was about to discover he had a twin brother living just 15 minutes away. A brother who could give him everything I couldn't, a second chance at life. Before you continue watching and find out how this ends, please subscribe to the channel and help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep posting incredible stories like this one. I met Jake on the most ordinary Tuesday of my life, surrounded by towers of returned books at the Chicago Public Library. I was 24, fresh out of library science school, and drowning in the monotony of scanning barcodes and shushing teenagers. That's when he walked in, oil-stained work boots squeaking against the polished floors, completely out of place among the whispered conversations and clicking keyboards. He stood there for a moment, looking lost, his dark hair slightly messy and his green eyes scanning the maze of shelves like he'd entered a foreign country. He wore a simple navy work shirt with Thompson's Auto Repair embroidered on the pocket, and there was something about the way he carried himself, confident but humble, strong but gentle, that made me look twice. "Excuse me," he said, approaching my desk with a shy smile that made my heart skip. "I'm looking for books about small business management. I have no idea where to start." His voice was warm, with just a hint of nervousness that I found endearing. I stood up, suddenly aware of my conservative cardigan and the pencil I'd unconsciously tucked behind my ear. "Follow me," I said, leading him through the business section. As we walked, I noticed how he moved with purpose, like someone used to working with his hands, someone who fixed things for a living. "Starting your own business?" I asked, pulling several books from the shelves. He nodded, his fingers brushing mine as I handed him the stack, sending an unexpected jolt of electricity through me. "Been working at Thompson's for 3 years, but I want to open my own garage someday. Fix classic cars, restore them to their original beauty." His eyes lit up as he spoke, and I found myself genuinely interested, not just in his dreams, but in the passionate way he talked about them. "That sounds amazing," I said, meaning it. "There's something beautiful about bringing old things back to life." He grinned, and I noticed a small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him even more attractive. Kind of like what you do here, right? Books have stories, cars have stories too. Both deserve to be preserved. I felt my cheeks warm. Most people saw the library as boring, outdated, but Jake understood. "Exactly," I whispered, surprised by how much his words meant to me. We spent the next hour talking by the automotive section, our conversation flowing from cars to books to dreams we'd never shared with strangers before. He told me about growing up in foster care, how he learned to fix engines as a way to feel useful, needed. I shared my love for quiet places, how books had been my escape when life felt overwhelming. When closing time arrived, neither of us wanted to leave. "Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" he asked, his confidence wavering just enough to reveal his vulnerability. "I promise I'll wash the motor oil off my hands first." I laughed, surprising myself. "I'd like that, but only if you tell me more about those classic cars." As I wrote my number on a library bookmark, I had no idea I was about to fall in love with the most genuine, hardworking man I'd ever meet. Our first real date happened 3 days later at a small diner downtown, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the pie was homemade. Jake showed up 15 minutes early, freshly showered, wearing a clean button-down shirt, but he'd clearly ironed himself. The sight of him trying so hard made my heart flutter. "You look beautiful," he said when I arrived, his eyes taking in my simple blue dress and cardigan. I was worried I'd be underdressed. I smiled, sliding into the booth across from him. "You look perfect." And he did. Not polished or pretentious, just real, authentic in a way that felt rare. Over burgers and fries, I learned more about Jake's world. He'd aged out of foster care at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and a talent for fixing things. No family photos to show, no childhood stories involving grandparents or siblings. Just him, making his way through life with determination and an optimism that amazed me. "Don't you ever wonder," I asked gently, "about your family, where you came from?" His expression clouded briefly. "I used to. When I was younger, I'd imagine scenarios. Maybe my parents were young and scared. Maybe they had good reasons. But after a while, you realize that wondering doesn't change anything. You just focus on the life you're building." I reached across the table and touched his hand, feeling the calluses from years of manual work. "You're building a good life, Jake." What I didn't tell him was how different our worlds really were. My parents were both college professors, my childhood filled with family dinners and summer vacations, educational trips to museums and libraries. I'd never known what it felt like to be truly alone, to have no safety net, no family to call when life got hard. The differences became more apparent when I introduced Jake to my parents 2 months into our relationship. We'd driven to their suburban home for Sunday dinner, and I could feel Jake's nervousness as we pulled into their driveway. "Livy, dear," my mother said, embracing me at the door, before turning to Jake with a polite but measured smile. "You must be Jake." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me." Jake's formality was sweet but painful to watch. He was trying so hard to fit into a world that felt foreign to him. Dinner was cordial but strained. My father, a literature professor, attempted conversation about books, while my mother, who taught sociology, asked careful questions about Jake's work. They weren't unkind, but I could see them cataloging differences: his lack of college education, his blue-collar job, his inability to discuss authors or academic theories. "He seems nice," my mother said later when Jake was helping my father with something in the garage. "But honey, are you sure you two are compatible long-term? You have such different backgrounds." I felt defensive rise in my chest. "Different doesn't mean incompatible, Mom. Jake is kind, hardworking, ambitious. He wants to build something meaningful." "Of course, dear. I just want you to think carefully about your future. Marriage is complicated enough without adding class differences into the mix." That night, as Jake drove me home, he was quieter than usual. "Your parents don't think I'm good enough for you," he said finally, his voice flat. "That's not true," I protested, but we both knew it wasn't entirely false either. "Maybe they're right," he said softly. "You could have anyone, someone with a college degree, someone who fits into your world." I turned to face him, grabbing his hand firming. "I don't want anyone else, Jake. I want you, exactly as you are." But I could see the seeds of doubt being planted, the way social expectations and family pressure had the power to make even the strongest love feel fragile. Our different worlds weren't just about money or education. They were about belonging, about feeling worthy of love regardless of where you came from. Despite my parents' reservations, Jake and I grew closer over the following months. He had this way of making ordinary moments feel extraordinary, bringing me coffee during my lunch breaks, leaving small handwritten notes tucked between the pages of books I was reading, showing up at the library with a single wildflower he'd picked on his way to work. One evening in late autumn, Jake invited me to his apartment above the garage where he worked. It was small, simple, but immaculately clean and organized. The walls were covered with sketches of classic cars he hoped to restore, and his tiny kitchen smelled like the marinara sauce he was stirring on the stove. "I'm not much of a cook," he admitted, looking nervous as he served homemade pasta, "but I figured you might be tired of eating out all the time." The meal was perfect, not because of the food, but because of the care he'd put into every detail. He'd even bought a small bouquet of daisies for the table, and I could see how much my opinion mattered to him. After dinner, we sat on his worn couch, talking softly while jazz music played from an old radio. The autumn wind rattled the windows, making the space feel intimate and protected from the outside world. "Lily," he said suddenly, his voice serious, "I know I'm not what your parents pictured for you. I know I don't have much to offer compared to other guys you could be with." I turned to face him fully, seeing the vulnerability in his green eyes. "Jake, you have everything I want. You're genuine, you work hard for your dreams, you make me laugh. You see beauty in things other people overlook. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his calloused fingers gentle against my skin. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "I didn't plan it, but I can't help it." My heart raced as I leaned closer. "I'm already there," I whispered back. When he kissed me, it was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as I responded. It felt like coming home and going on an adventure at the same time. In that moment, surrounded by his dreams sketched on paper and the smell of motor oil that seemed to follow him everywhere, I knew I wanted to build a life with this man. Our bubble of happiness burst the following week when my father called with news that changed everything. The head librarian at Northwestern University was retiring, and he'd recommended me for the position. It was a dream job: better pay, prestige, the chance to work with rare manuscripts and serious researchers. "It's an incredible opportunity, Lily," my father said over dinner. "You'd be crazy not to take it. And it would give you some distance to really think about your relationship choices." I felt Jake tense beside me at the dinner table. We both knew what my father really meant: distance from Jake, a chance to meet someone more suitable. That night, Jake and I walked through Lincoln Park in heavy silence, the lake wind cutting through our jackets. Finally, he stopped walking and turned to face me. "You should take the job," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Jake, no. I don't want to leave Chicago. I don't want to leave you." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "Lily, this is exactly what I was afraid of. Your family, your career, your whole life is pulling you in a different direction. You deserve that opportunity." "What I deserve is to make my own choices," I said, my voice rising. "I choose you, Jake. I choose us." "But what if you regret it?" His voice cracked slightly. "What if 5 years from now you resent me for holding you back? What if you wake up one day and realize you settled?" The doubt in his voice broke my heart. "Is that really what you think? That being with you would be settling?" "Isn't it?" He looked at me with such pain in his eyes. "You could have a professor, a doctor, someone who fits into your world. Instead, you're with a guy who barely graduated high school and spends his days covered in grease." I stepped closer, grabbing his hands firmly. "Jake Carter, you listen to me. You are not less than anyone because of your job or your education. You have integrity, compassion, and dreams that inspire me every day. Don't let my parents' prejudices make you doubt your worth." But I could see the damage was already done. The seeds of insecurity had taken root, and no amount of reassurance seemed to reach him. "Maybe we should take a break," he said quietly. "Give you time to really think about what you want without me influencing your decision." "I don't need time to think. I know what I want." "Please, Lily, if we're meant to be together, a few weeks apart won't change that. But if you're supposed to take this job, build a different life, then I don't want to be the thing that stops you." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, frustrated by his nobility, his willingness to sacrifice his own happiness for what he thought was mine. "And what if I refuse the job and you still think I'm too good for you? What if you keep pushing me away every time an opportunity comes up?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. That night, I went home alone, my heart breaking for a man who couldn't see his own worth, and angry at a world that made love feel like it wasn't enough to bridge the gap between different backgrounds. The Northwestern job application sat on my desk, unopened, while I cried myself to sleep. 3 weeks of silence stretched between us like an open wound. I walked through my days at the library mechanically, checking out books and organizing shelves, while my heart remained firmly stuck in a small apartment above an auto shop. I'd written and deleted dozens of text messages to Jake, picked up my phone to call him countless times, but always stopped myself. He'd asked for space, and I was trying to respect that, even as it killed me. The Northwestern application remained untouched on my desk, a symbol of a choice I couldn't make. Every time I looked at it, I heard Jake's voice asking if I'd regret choosing him over career advancement. But how could I regret choosing love? Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. It was a rainy Thursday evening when I drove to Thompson's Auto Repair, my heart pounding as I pulled into the empty lot. Through the garage windows, I could see Jake working alone under the hood of an old Mustang, completely absorbed in his task. I knocked on the side door, and when he looked up, the expression that crossed his face was a mixture of hope and pain that nearly undid me. "Lily," he set down his wrench and walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "What are you doing here?" "I miss you," I said simply. "I miss us, and I need you to know that I turned down the Northwestern job." His eyes widened. "Lily, no, you can't make decisions like that because of me." "I didn't make it because of you, Jake. I made it for me, for us, because I realized that my dream job isn't worth anything if I can't share it with the person I love." He leaned against the doorframe, looking torn between relief and guilt. "Your parents are going to blame me." "Let them. I'm 25 years old, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own choices." I stepped closer, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the way he looked like he hadn't been sleeping well either. "Have you been as miserable as I have?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Worse. I've been rebuilding the same engine 3 times because I can't concentrate." "Then why are we doing this to ourselves?" I reached for his hand, not caring that it was stained with grease. "Why are we letting other people's opinions matter more than what we feel?" He pulled me into his arms then, holding me tight against his chest while the rain drummed on the garage roof. "I love you, Lily. I love you so much it scares me." "Then fight for us," I whispered against his shoulder. "Stop trying to protect me from choices I want to make." Over the next 6 months, Jake and I rebuilt our relationship stronger than before. We'd learned not to let outside pressures dictate our happiness, and we started making plans for a real future together. Jake had saved enough money to lease a small building across town, and his dream of opening his own restoration shop was finally becoming reality. I helped him paint the walls and organize his tools, and watching his face light up as he transformed the empty space into something magical was better than any career achievement I could have imagined. He'd found a 1967 Camaro that someone was selling for parts, and slowly, methodically, he was bringing it back to life. "This is going to be our showpiece," he said one evening as we worked side by side, me organizing invoices while he calibrated equipment. "The car that proves what we can do here." Our relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We'd spend evenings together, sometimes at the library after hours, where I'd catch up on work while he sketched restoration plans, sometimes at his apartment where he'd cook dinner while I read to him from whatever book I was currently obsessed with. But there were still moments when I caught glimpses of his insecurity, the way he'd grow quiet when we ran into my colleagues from the university, or how he'd deflect compliments about his work with self-deprecating jokes. The boy who'd grown up without family, without anyone telling him he was worthy of love, still lived inside the confident man I'd fallen for. One evening, while we were having dinner with my parents, a monthly tradition we'd established to help them get to know Jake better, my mother made a comment that stuck with me. "Jake, you have such strong hands," she said, watching him help clear the table. "Very capable. You know, my grandfather was a carpenter, and he had hands just like yours. There's something to be said for people who can build things, fix things with their own hands." It was the first genuinely warm thing she'd said to him, and I saw Jake's shoulders relax slightly. Later, as we drove home, he was quieter than usual. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. "Your mom mentioned her grandfather. It made me wonder about mine, you know, whether I got this love of fixing things from someone or if it's just random." He was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I think about what it would be like to have that connection, to know where certain traits came from." I squeezed his hand. "Maybe someday we'll find out." "Maybe," he said, but his tone suggested he'd long ago stopped hoping for that kind of discovery. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in March when Jake collapsed at the garage. One moment he was working under the Camaro, the next Tom Thompson was calling an ambulance because Jake couldn't catch his breath and his skin had turned an alarming shade of gray. I met them at Chicago General Hospital, my heart in my throat as I watched them wheel Jake into the emergency room. He was conscious, but looked terrible, pale, exhausted, like something was draining the life out of him from the inside. It's probably just overwork, I told myself as I paced the waiting room. He's been putting in long hours getting the shop ready. But the tests revealed something far more serious. Dr. Martinez, a kind woman with graying hair and gentle eyes, sat us down in a small consultation room that smelled like disinfectant and delivered news that shattered our world. Jake, you have chronic kidney disease. It's advanced, and it's progressing rapidly. We need to start discussing treatment options immediately. The words felt surreal, impossible. Jake was only 28, healthy, strong. How could his kidneys be failing? What kind of treatment? Jake asked, his voice steady despite the fear I could see in his eyes. Initially, we'll try to slow the progression with medication and dietary changes, but eventually, you're going to need a kidney transplant. Without it, she didn't finish the sentence, but we both understood. The next few weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, dietary restrictions, and the gradual acceptance that our carefully planned future had been completely derailed. Jake's energy levels plummeted. He could no longer work full days at the garage, and his dream restoration shop had to be put on indefinite hold. "This isn't fair to you," he said one evening as I helped him organize his medications. "You didn't sign up for this." "Jake, stop. I signed up for you, for better or worse. We're going to get through this." But I could see him pulling away again. The same self-doubt that had surfaced during the Northwestern job situation, now amplified by his illness. He'd grown up believing he wasn't worth fighting for, and the disease was feeding into those fears. "You should be with someone who can give you the life you deserve," he said. "Someone healthy, someone who doesn't come with all these complications." "Don't you dare," I said firmly. "Don't you dare use this disease as an excuse to push me away again. We're stronger than this, Jake." But as the weeks passed and his condition worsened, I watched the man I loved disappear into himself, building walls I couldn't climb. He stopped talking about the future, stopped making plans, stopped believing that love could be enough to overcome the obstacles life kept throwing at us. The worst part was knowing that somewhere out there might be someone who could save him, a family member who could donate a kidney, but Jake had no one to call, no family tree to explore. We were registered with the transplant list, but the wait could be years, and Jake's doctors weren't optimistic about his timeline. I felt helpless, desperate, and more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The man I loved was slipping away from me, both physically and emotionally, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Jake's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next month. What started as fatigue and shortness of breath became something much more frightening: swelling in his legs, confusion that came and went, and a gray pallor that made him look like a ghost of himself. The doctors moved him from outpatient treatment to regular hospital stays, then finally to a more permanent arrangement in the nephrology wing of Chicago General. I practically lived at the hospital, taking extended leave from the library to be with him. Most days, Jake slept fitfully while machines monitored his failing kidneys and pumped medications into his system. When he was awake, he was often too tired to talk, but he'd squeeze my hand and give me that crooked smile that had first captured my heart 3 years ago. On a particularly difficult Thursday afternoon, after Jake had been barely responsive all day, I needed air. I needed to step outside the sterile hospital room and remember what the rest of the world looked like. I made my way to the small courtyard behind the hospital, a little garden space where families often went to gather themselves before facing whatever waited for them upstairs. I sat on a weathered bench, watching clouds drift across the late autumn sky, when I heard voices nearby. 2 hospital maintenance workers were taking their break, sitting at a picnic table about 20 feet away. Normally, I wouldn't have paid attention to their conversation, but one phrase caught my ear and made me freeze. "You know that guy in room 318, the mechanic with kidney failure?" My heart stopped. Room 318 was Jake's room. Yeah, poor kid. Real shame. Guy that young. I'm telling you, Mike, it's the craziest thing. He looks exactly like this mechanic I know who works downtown. I mean, exactly like him. Same face, same build, everything. If I didn't know better, I'd swear they were twins. The blood drained from my face. Twins? Where downtown? The first man asked. Thompson's garage, just off Michigan Avenue. Guy's name is Ethan, I think. Ethan Reeves. Works on classic cars. Real artist with engines. I swear, if you put him and the kid upstairs in the same room, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Thompson's garage. The same garage where Jake had worked for 3 years before opening his own shop. How was it possible that there was another mechanic who looked exactly like him working at his old job? My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and searched for Thompson's garage. There, on their website, was a staff page with photos. I scrolled until I found him, Ethan Reeves, restoration specialist. The photo was small, but even on my phone screen, the resemblance was unmistakable. He had Jake's same dark hair, the same strong jaw, the same green eyes. They weren't just similar, they were identical. I ran back into the hospital, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Jake was awake when I entered his room, sitting up slightly and looking more alert than he had in days. "Lily, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" I sat down hard in the chair beside his bed, trying to catch my breath. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully. When you were in foster care, did anyone ever mention anything about twins? About you having a brother?" His eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "What? No, why would you ask that?" I showed him my phone with Ethan's picture pulled up. "Because I just heard 2 hospital workers talking about how you look exactly like this man. His name is Ethan Reeves, and he works at Thompson's garage." Jake stared at the screen for a long moment, his face going pale. That's impossible." "Look at him, Jake. Really look." He took the phone with shaking hands, studying the picture intently. I watched as recognition and disbelief warred across his features. "He does look like me," he admitted quietly. "But, Lily, this doesn't mean anything. People resemble each other all the time." "At Thompson's garage, Jake, the same place you worked for 3 years. How did you never run into him?" "I don't know. Maybe he started after I left. Maybe we worked different shifts." But his voice lacked conviction. I leaned forward, taking his hand. "What if he's your twin brother? What if he's been right there, 15 minutes away, this whole time?" Jake's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching panic. "Lily, stop. This is crazy. Even if, and I'm saying if, this guy is somehow related to me, so what? It doesn't change anything. I'm still dying, and dragging some stranger into this mess isn't fair to anyone." "He's not a stranger if he's your brother. Jake, he could be a kidney donor. He could save your life. Or he could take one look at me and decide he wants nothing to do with the sick foster kid who's asking for his organs." Jake's voice was bitter, defensive. "Lily, I've survived 30 years without family. I don't need to go begging now." The pain in his voice broke my heart, but it also made me angry. This isn't about begging, Jake. This is about giving both of you the chance to know each other exists. This is about saving your life. What if you're wrong? What if this destroys whatever hope I have left? I could see the fear behind his anger, the lifetime of abandonment and rejection that made him terrified to reach for something that might not be there. But I could also see him dying in front of me, and I wasn't going to let pride or fear take him away from me. "Then we deal with that together," I said firmly. "But Jake, what if I'm right?" The argument that followed was the worst fight we'd ever had. Jake accused me of giving him false hope, of refusing to accept the reality of his situation. I accused him of giving up, of choosing fear over the possibility of a miracle. We said things we didn't mean, hurt each other in ways that felt irreparable. You can't just fix this with your optimism, Lily, Jake shouted, his voice hoarse. This isn't some broken engine you can research and repair. This is my life, and maybe it's time you accepted that some things can't be saved. So you're just going to lie here and die? You're going to give up without even trying? I'm being realistic. I'm trying to protect both of us from more disappointment. No, you're being a coward. The words were out before I could stop them, and I saw Jake recoil as if I'd slapped him. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake turned away from me, staring out the hospital window with tears streaming down his face. "Get out," he said quietly. "Jake, I didn't mean—" "Get out, Lily. Just go home. Go back to your library, your books, your safe little world where everything makes sense. Stop trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved." I left the hospital that night feeling more broken than I ever had in my life. I'd potentially discovered Jake's twin brother, a man who could save his life, and instead of gratitude, I'd been met with anger and rejection. The man I loved was pushing me away again, choosing isolation over hope, and this time I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight him. At home, I sat at my kitchen table staring at Ethan Reeves's contact information, which I'd found on the Thompsons' Garage website. Jake had forbidden me from contacting him, but Jake was also dying while his potential salvation worked just across town. The weight of the decision felt enormous. If I respected Jake's wishes and did nothing, he would likely die within months. If I reached out to Ethan against Jake's explicit instructions, I might save Jake's life, but I might also lose him forever if he never forgave me for going behind his back. I thought about our 3 years together, all the moments that had led us to this point. Jake teaching me to appreciate the beauty in restored engines, me helping him see that love wasn't about deserving or earning, but about choosing to stay. We'd overcome class differences, family disapproval, and his own insecurities. But this felt different. This felt like it might be the thing that finally broke us. As dawn broke over Chicago, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I picked up my phone and dialed Thompson's Garage, asking to speak with Ethan Reeves. If Jake never forgave me, I'd have to live with that. But I couldn't live with watching him die when there might be another option. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Familiar because it sounded exactly like Jake's. "This is Ethan." "My name is Lily Connor," I said, my voice shaking as I gripped the phone. "I need to talk to you about something that's going to sound impossible." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay, what's this about?" "It's about a man named Jake Carter. He's in the hospital, and he looks exactly like you. I think he might be your twin brother." The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally, Ethan's voice came back, cautious and confused. "Lady, I don't know what kind of scam this is, but it's not a scam. Please, just meet me somewhere. Let me show you his picture. If I'm wrong, you never have to see me again." Something in my desperation must have reached him, because he agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near Thompson's Garage that afternoon. I spent the morning in agony, knowing I was betraying Jake's trust but unable to stop myself. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I spotted Ethan immediately, not because I recognized him, but because seeing him was like seeing Jake's ghost. He was slightly taller than Jake, a little broader in the shoulders, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same strong hands that spoke of years working with tools. When he saw me, his face went white. "Jesus," he whispered, sliding into the booth across from me. "You weren't kidding about the resemblance thing." I showed him photos of Jake, pictures from our early dating days when he was healthy and strong, smiling as he worked on his Camaro restoration. Ethan stared at them for a long time, his expressions cycling through disbelief, recognition, and something that looked like grief. "I always wondered," he said finally. "Growing up, people would sometimes ask if I had a twin. I was adopted when I was 6 months old, and my parents never hid that from me, but they said they didn't know about any siblings. Jake grew up in foster care. He was abandoned at birth, never had any information about his family. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. So we've been in the same city this whole time, working at the same garage? Different shifts, apparently. You started working there after Jake left to open his own shop. I leaned forward, desperate to make him understand. Ethan, he's dying. His kidneys are failing and he needs a transplant. Family members are the best chance for a match. And he doesn't know you're here? I shook my head, ashamed. He told me not to contact you. He's been abandoned so many times that he can't risk hoping for family, even now. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring out the coffee shop window. What kind of person is he? The question surprised me. Kind, hardworking. He fixes things, not just engines, but people too. He made me believe I was worthy of love when I felt broken. He's stubborn and proud, but he has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. And you love him. More than anything. Ethan nodded slowly. I'll get tested, but I want to meet him first, before he knows who I am. Can you arrange that? The plan we devised felt like something out of a movie, but it was the only way I could think of to honor both Jake's emotional needs and his medical ones. Ethan would visit Jake in the hospital, posing as someone from Thompson's garage who'd heard about his illness and wanted to check on him. If they connected, if Jake felt comfortable with him, then we'd reveal the truth. I returned to the hospital that evening, my stomach in knots. Jake was awake but refused to look at me when I entered his room. I thought I told you to go home, he said coldly. Jake, please. I'm sorry about what I said. I was scared and frustrated, but I had no right to call you a coward. He turned to face me then, and I saw the hurt in his eyes. You think I'm giving up. I think you're protecting yourself the only way you know how. But Jake, sometimes protecting yourself means missing out on things that could save you. We talked for hours that night, slowly rebuilding the bridge between us. I didn't mention Ethan, couldn't bring myself to confess what I'd done, but I tried to prepare Jake for the possibility of family without revealing specifics. What if someone came forward? I asked carefully. Someone who might be related to you? Lily, we've been through this. I know, but just what if? Would you at least consider the possibility? Jake was quiet for a long time. I guess I'd want to know what kind of person they were, whether they were someone I could trust, someone who wouldn't just disappear when things got complicated. And how would you figure that out? I don't know. Spend time with them, I guess. See if we clicked, if there was some kind of connection. He reached for my hand. Why are you asking me this? Because I love you, and I want you to be open to possibilities, even impossible ones. The next day, I texted Ethan that it was time. He arrived at the hospital looking nervous but determined, carrying a small bouquet of flowers and wearing a clean work shirt. I met him in the lobby and walked him to Jake's room, my heart pounding with every step. Remember, I whispered before we entered, you're just a colleague checking on him. Don't mention the resemblance unless he does. Jake was sitting up in bed, looking better than he had in days. When he saw Ethan walk in behind me, his face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before. Confusion, recognition, and something close to wonder. Jake, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, this is Ethan Reeves. He works at Thompson's garage and heard you were sick. Ethan stepped forward, extending his hand. Hey man, I know this is weird, but I wanted to check on you. We never met when you worked at Thompson's, but everyone there speaks really highly of you. Jake shook his hand, still staring. Do I know you from somewhere? You look really familiar. I get that a lot, Ethan said with a small smile. Must have one of those faces. I watched, holding my breath, as the two men who shared the same DNA began to talk. The conversation flowed naturally. They discovered shared interests in classic car restoration, similar philosophies about craftsmanship, and the same dry sense of humor. Within an hour, they were laughing together like old friends. As I watched them, I realized this was bigger than just a medical solution. These two men, separated at birth and raised in completely different circumstances, had found each other. And whether Jake knew it yet or not, he was about to discover that he'd never been as alone as he thought. Ethan visited Jake every day for the next week, and I watched in amazement as they developed a genuine friendship. They shared stories about their work, their dreams, their frustrations with difficult customers, and impossible repair jobs. Jake seemed more alive than he had in months, energized by having someone who truly understood his passion for restoration. But I was living with a secret that felt heavier each day. Every time Jake mentioned how comfortable he felt with Ethan, how it was strange to feel so connected to someone he just met, I felt the weight of the truth pressing down on me. On Friday evening, after Ethan had left for the day, Jake turned to me with a puzzled expression. "Lily, this is going to sound crazy, but I keep having this feeling that I've known Ethan my whole life. Like there's some connection I can't quite put my finger on." My heart raced. "What do you mean?" "I don't know how to explain it. We have the same mannerisms, the same way of approaching problems. Yesterday, he was telling me about this '67 Mustang he's restoring, and I swear I could picture every detail before he described it. It's like we share the same brain sometimes." I took a deep breath, knowing I couldn't keep the secret much longer. "Jake, what would you say if I told you there might be a reason for that connection?" He studied my face carefully. "What aren't you telling me?" Before I could answer, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face serious. "Actually, there's something we both need to tell you." Jake looked between us, confusion growing. "What's going on?" Ethan sat down in the chair on the other side of Jake's bed. "Jake, that first day when Lily introduced us, you said I looked familiar. You were right to feel that way." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I think we're brothers. Twins, actually." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake stared at Ethan, then at me, then back at Ethan. "What?" "I've been tested," Ethan continued. "DNA, blood type, everything. We're identical twins, separated at birth. You were placed in foster care. I was adopted. We've been living in the same city, working in the same field, for years without knowing the other existed." Jake's face cycled through disbelief, shock, and something that looked like grief. "You've known this the whole time?" he asked me, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, tears starting to fall. "I'm sorry, Jake. I heard those hospital workers talking about the resemblance, and I couldn't let it go. I was so scared of losing you that I went behind your back." "You lied to me. I was trying to save your life." Jake was quiet for a long time, processing everything. Finally, he looked at Ethan. "So, you're my brother?" "Yeah, I am." "And you came here because Lily asked you to?" Ethan shook his head. "I came here because she told me you existed, but I kept coming back because I felt that connection too. Jake, I've wondered my whole life if I had siblings. Finding you, it's like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing." The revelation changed everything and nothing all at once. Jake was angry with me for deceiving him, but he was also amazed to discover he had a brother. Ethan was eager to help with the kidney transplant, but Jake was reluctant to ask for such a massive sacrifice from someone he'd just met, even if that someone was family. "You don't owe me anything," Jake told Ethan during one of their conversations. "We may be brothers, but we're still strangers. I can't ask you to give up a kidney for me." "You're not asking, I'm offering," Ethan replied firmly. "Jake, I've had 30 years to build a life, to pursue my dreams. You deserve the same chance." Meanwhile, Jake and I were navigating the complicated emotions of trust rebuilt and boundaries crossed. He understood why I'd gone behind his back, but it hurt him that I'd made such a major decision without him. "I know you were trying to help," he said during one of our difficult conversations, "but Lily, you can't just decide what's best for me and then manipulate the situation to make it happen, even with good intentions." "You're right," I admitted. "I was so terrified of losing you that I forgot to respect your autonomy. I'm sorry. I need to know that you trust me to make my own decisions, even the hard ones." "I do trust you, and I promise no more secrets, no more going behind your back. But Jake, I also need you to promise me something." "What?" Promise me you won't make decisions based on fear anymore. Don't refuse the transplant because you're scared of depending on someone or because you don't think you deserve it. Make the decision based on what you actually want. Jake was quiet for a moment. What I want is to live. I want to marry you, have a family with you, build that restoration business we've talked about. I want to get to know my brother, maybe even work together someday. Then fight for that life, Jake. Accept Ethan's help and fight for the future we've both been dreaming about. The transplant was scheduled for the following month, pending final medical clearances and preparations. Ethan's kidney was a perfect match, better than the doctors had dared to hope for. As the date approached, I watched both men prepare in their own ways. Jake spent time writing letters, to me, to Ethan, to the foster families who had cared for him over the years. He wanted to make peace with his past and express gratitude for the people who had shaped him, even in small ways. Ethan, meanwhile, threw himself into researching post-transplant care and recovery. He bought books about kidney health, modified his own diet to match what Jake's would need to be, and even started planning modifications to Jake's apartment to make his recovery easier. "You know," Jake said one evening as we sat together in his hospital room, "I spent so many years convinced I was completely alone in the world. It's strange to discover I had a brother all along." "How does it feel?" I asked. "Terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Like I've been given this incredible gift, but I'm afraid to believe it's real." "It's real, Jake. Ethan is real, and he's not going anywhere. Neither are you, right?" His voice was vulnerable, uncertain. I took his hand firmly. "Never. We're going to get through this surgery, and then we're going to build the most beautiful life together. You, me, and the brother you thought you'd never have." The morning of the transplant surgery, I arrived at the hospital to find both Jake and Ethan calm but serious. They'd spent the previous evening together, talking about their childhoods, sharing memories, and filling in gaps in each other's stories. "You know what's funny?" Jake told me as the nurses prepared him for surgery. "Ethan and I both have the same scar above our left eyebrow. His is from falling off a bike when he was 7. Mine is from falling off a playground when I was 8. Same location, same shape, just different stories." "Maybe it's a twin thing," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite my fear. "Maybe." He reached for my hand. "Lily, if something goes wrong today, nothing is going wrong. But if it does, I need you to know that these last 3 years with you have been the best of my life. You taught me what it felt like to be truly loved, to be worthy of someone's devotion. Even if this is the end, it was worth it." I leaned down and kissed him softly. "This isn't the end, Jake Carter. This is the beginning. You're going to wake up with a healthy kidney from your brother, and we're going to spend the next 50 years arguing about whether to restore Camaros or Mustangs first." He laughed despite his nervousness. "Camaros, obviously." "Obviously," I agreed, even though I had no preference beyond wanting him alive to debate it. The surgery took 8 hours. I spent them in the waiting room with Ethan's adoptive parents, who had driven in from Milwaukee to support their son. They were kind people who welcomed me immediately and shared stories about Ethan's childhood that helped me understand where Jake's determination and work ethic had come from. When Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the operating room, her tired but triumphant smile told me everything I needed to know before she spoke. "Both surgeries went perfectly," she announced. "Jake's body is already responding well to the new kidney, and Ethan came through the donation without any complications. They're both going to be fine." Recovery was slow but steady. Jake and Ethan were in rooms next to each other, and I split my time between them, watching two brothers get to know each other while their bodies healed. The transformation in Jake was remarkable, not just physically, as his color returned and his energy slowly came back, but emotionally as well. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," he confided to me one afternoon. "For Ethan to decide this was all a mistake, or for the kidney to reject, or for something to go wrong. I've never had anything this good happen to me." "Maybe it's time to start believing you deserve good things," I suggested. 3 weeks after the surgery, Jake was discharged from the hospital. Ethan, who had recovered more quickly from the donation surgery, insisted on driving us home. As we pulled up to our little house, I saw that someone had been busy while we were away. The front yard, which had been brown and neglected during Jake's illness, had been transformed into a beautiful garden. There were flowers planted along the walkway, new shutters on the windows, and a porch swing where our old plastic chairs used to be. "Ethan," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion, "you didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," Ethan replied simply. "I figured you'd need a nice place to recover. Besides, I had some time on my hands while you were sleeping off the surgery." Inside, the house had been cleaned and organized, the refrigerator stocked with healthy foods that matched Jake's new dietary requirements. There were fresh flowers on the kitchen table and a card that read, "Welcome home, brother." That evening, as Jake rested on the couch and Ethan worked on his laptop at the kitchen table, apparently running his side of the restoration business from our house until Jake was fully recovered, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. "Lily," Jake called softly. I walked over to where he was lying, noting the healthy color in his cheeks and the clarity in his eyes. "What is it?" "Marry me." I blinked in surprise. "What?" "I know I should have a ring, and I should plan something romantic, but I almost died without asking you to be my wife. I don't want to waste any more time." He struggled to sit up, taking my hands in his. "Lily Connor, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You found my brother, you fought for my health, you loved me when I didn't think I was worth loving. Will you marry me?" Through my tears, I could see Ethan smiling at us from the kitchen table. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." As Jake pulled me into his arms, I realized that our love story had never been about overcoming obstacles or proving we belonged together. It had been about choosing each other, again and again, through every challenge life threw at us. And now, with Jake healthy and a brother who had become part of our family, we finally had the chance to build the future we'd been dreaming of all along. 6 months later, Jake and Ethan opened Carter and Reeves Classic Auto Restoration, a business that combined Jake's artistic vision with Ethan's technical expertise. Their first completed project was Jake's 1967 Camaro, which they'd worked on together during Jake's recovery. It sat in the showroom like a promise kept, proof that broken things could be made beautiful again. Our wedding was small but perfect, held in the garden behind our house, with Ethan as Jake's best man and my parents, who had come to genuinely love and respect Jake, beaming in the front row. During his toast, Ethan said something that made everyone cry. "I spent 30 years thinking I was alone in the world, and Jake spent 30 years thinking the same thing. But love has a way of bringing lost people together, and sometimes the family you've been looking for has been looking for you too." Jake's health continued to improve dramatically. The new kidney functioned perfectly, and gradually he was able to return to all the activities he loved. More importantly, the experience had changed his relationship with hope itself. The man who had once been afraid to dream beyond tomorrow now made plans years in advance. "I used to think that wanting things too much was dangerous," he told me one evening as we sat on our new porch swing, watching Ethan work on a client's Mustang in the driveway. "I thought if I didn't hope for too much, I couldn't be disappointed." And now? Now I think hope is what saved my life. Your hope, Ethan's hope, even my own hope that I was afraid to acknowledge. Sometimes the things we're most afraid to want are exactly what we need. The relationship between the brothers deepened as they worked together daily. They discovered they had complementary skills. Jake was the artist, Ethan was the engineer, and their combined talents produced restorations that were both beautiful and mechanically perfect. More than that, they filled gaps in each other's lives that neither had realized existed. 1 year after the transplant, on a crisp October morning, I got the news that changed everything again, but this time in the most wonderful way possible. I was pregnant. Jake cried when I told him, holding me tight in the garage where he and Ethan were working on a 1965 Ford Mustang convertible. "We're going to have a family," he whispered against my hair. "A real family." We already have a real family, I reminded him, gesturing toward Ethan, who was pretending not to eavesdrop but was clearly thrilled by the news. I know, Jake said, but now it's going to get even better. The baby, a daughter we named Hope, was born healthy and perfect the following summer. Jake was an incredible father from day one, approaching parenthood with the same careful attention he gave to his car restorations. Ethan embraced his role as uncle with enthusiasm, spoiling Hope shamelessly and teaching her to recognize different engine sounds before she could walk. As I write this, Hope is 3 years old and has her father's green eyes and his gift for fixing things. She helps in the garage, wearing tiny coveralls that Ethan had made specially for her, and she can identify the difference between a carburetor and an alternator better than most adults. Jake often jokes that she'll probably be rebuilding engines before she's 10. The restoration business thrived, earning a reputation for quality and artistry that brought clients from across the Midwest. But more than professional success, Jake and Ethan had found something neither had dared to hope for, the family they'd been born into but never knew existed. Looking back on those dark months when Jake was dying and I was desperate enough to chase down strangers based on overheard conversations, I'm amazed by how much our lives have changed. We learned that love isn't just about choosing each other, but about fighting for each other, even when that fight requires impossible hope and uncomfortable truths. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't overheard those hospital workers, if I hadn't been brave enough to seek out Ethan, if I hadn't been willing to risk Jake's anger to save his life. But then I look at our life now, Jake healthy and thriving, Ethan an integral part of our family, Hope playing in the garage while her father and uncle work on yet another classic car. And I know that some stories are meant to have happy endings. The love that brought us together was strong enough to survive secrets, illness, fear, and the seemingly impossible odds of finding family in a city of millions. And every day, as I watch Jake teaching Hope how to hold a wrench properly while Ethan tells her stories about the cars they're restoring, I'm reminded that the most beautiful things in life often come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes all it takes is someone who loves you enough to eavesdrop on strangers and chase down impossible hopes. Sometimes family finds you when you've stopped looking for it. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love really can fix everything that's broken.
Your heart knows the way. Subscribe and follow the beauty.